All right, guys, we're going to start our first project in U.S. history called Resolving Political Conflicts. And what this project is about is conflict and its resolution. All right, let's review our project. All right, the Cox skills that are going to be assessed is making connections and inferences, multimedia and communication, explaining evidence, synthesizing multiple sources, and argumentative claim. We're going to go over each one of these Cox skills as we move through the checkpoints. All right, in checkpoint 1, you're going to look at the French and Indian War and try to understand how that caused tension between the British and the American colonists. In checkpoint 2, you're going to look at the Boston Massacre, and then you're going to research different conflict resolution strategies to answer these two questions you see. Which conflict resolution strategy would have worked best in preventing the American Revolution, and explain how? Then, which conflict resolution strategy would have been the least effective in preventing the American Revolution, and why? Checkpoint 3, you're going to use resources from checkpoint 1 and 2 to answer this question. Was the American Revolutionary War avoidable? And in checkpoint 4, you're going to pick a current political issue, and you're going to research that issue, understand the different points of view on it, and then create a solution for it using one of the conflict resolution strategies from checkpoint 2. Okay. The final product is where you're going to combine checkpoints 2, 3, and 4 in a Google slide or PowerPoint with illustrations with your resources, and then you're going to create a shareable link and submit that for your final product. All right, so let's start checkpoint 1. Checkpoint 1 is really all about the French and Indian War and its effects. So the French and Indian War started in 1754 and went all the way to 1763. Worldwide, it's called the 7 Years' War. It did start in North America with the French and the British, and then it spread to like a worldwide conflict between those two countries, basically for worldwide domination. All right, it was a war between, at least in North America, between the British and the French over the Ohio River Valley, or we'll just say North America. The Indians fought on the side of the French. Why? Okay, guys, take a look at the map here to the left. You see the 13 colonies is going to be the darker beige region. The French controlled the interior part of North America. Specifically, where my arrow is, it says Ohio. That's the Ohio River, and it has a valley right there. And this valley is great for agriculture. It has a lot of beavers. That's what the French want, because beavers have really good fur to make jackets out of. And it gets really cold in France and other parts of the world, and you need a good beaver fur jacket to stay warm. Okay, so the French and the British are going to fight for control of the Ohio River Valley, which is going to be basically all of North America. The British are going to win. So the British are going to defeat the French and their Indian allies. And the Treaty of Paris is going to end the war in 1763. So in the treaty, it ended the war. The French lost all of their land in North America. They gave it over to the British. And let's take a look at the boundary of the British holdings in North America after the war. So the Mississippi River is going to be the boundary of the British holdings or possessions in North America. Before the French and Indian War, the British only control land up to the Appalachian Mountains. After the French and Indian War, the British will control everything up to the Mississippi River. So it's going to like double the land for the British. So the colonists are really happy after the French and Indian War, because they think now that the British control this land, they can start to move here to the Ohio River Valley. Next. All right, so what are the effects of the French and Indian War? 1, the British were deep in debt. They owed a lot of money. And 2, they gained new land from the French. So the new land that the British are going to get from the French is this land between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River, and it's filled with Native Americans. The king does not want the colonists moving past the Appalachian Mountains because it's going to start another expensive war with the American Indians. So the king is going to issue this law called the Proclamation of 1763. And it's going to forbid the colonists moving past Appalachian Mountains into this land that they just acquired. This is going to make the colonists very angry because they feel they have a right to start to occupy this land because they fought for it and they took it from the French. And if the king told them they can't do that, they feel like the king is stopping them from having a great life. So the takeaways from the Proclamation of 1763, the king forbid the colonists to move past the mountains because he doesn't want the colonists to start another expensive war with the American Indians. And another effect of the French and Indian War was taxations. So Parliament taxed colonists without their consent to pay war debt. The colonists never had representation in Parliament. Ever since Jamestown, the colonists have been used to self-government, representative government, and Parliament and the king allow the colonists to develop the House of Burgesses, to write the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, to write the Mayflower Compact, to let the colonies rule themselves. As long as the colonists were making money for the king and the Parliament, they didn't care what the colonists did, as long as they were making money. But now that the colonists put the British Empire deep in debt, Parliament and the king feel like they are going to tell the colonists what taxes they have to pay. So the British government is going to tell the colonists, you don't have a say in the taxes that you pay. We're going to tell you what taxes to pay. And the colonists are going to get really angry because they want a voice in the taxes they have to pay. They want their representatives to be in Parliament. And the king and the Parliament are not going to allow them to do it. That's going to be one of the major reasons why the colonists are going to declare independence from Britain. So, guys, when you go into the project, and when you go to checkpoint 1, changing relations in the colonies, you look at the top of the screen. This is one way you can submit your final product for checkpoint 1 by clicking changing relations in the colonies. You click here. Click on that, it will take you here to this page. In this box is where you're going to type in your response. So there are two cog skills. We got argument of claim and explanation of evidence. So the question is, how did the French and Indian War change relationships between the British and the colonists? Your argument of claim is answering this question. You're going to say the French and Indian War changed the relationship between the British and colonists by, and that's where you're going to put your reason, and then you're going to have to support it with evidence. Okay. Another option for you to submit checkpoint 1 is go to checkpoint 1, support. What this does is offer sentence stems. You may like to use sentence stems, you may not. It's up to you. But if you do this, please remove the quotation marks, because quotation marks are words you borrow from somebody else. So if you use this option, please remove that. So the sentence stem says the French and Indian War changed the relationship between the British and the colonists. That is where you're going to explain, well, how did it change, you know? And then you need to put in your evidence to support your argument of claim. You need to also have an explanation of the evidence by saying additionally, well, that's also what we call a subclaim, right? So you're going to explain the evidence, and then you can have a concluding sentence. The more that you explain how your quote supports your argument of claim, the higher the cog skill you're going to get. We're going to look at the cog skills so that you see how and why that happens. Okay, where are you going to get your evidence to support your argument of claim? You got a couple choices. We have changing relations in the colonies document set support, and then somewhere in your resources it'll say also changing relations in colonies document set target. Either one is fine, but I'm going to show you the support. They're both the same thing. The only difference is that in the support one, it's going to have these boxes here, which basically ask some follow-up questions like, was the relationship between Britain and the colonies? What is the relationship between Britain and the colonies in this document? The relationship between Britain and the colonies is. So they provide sentence stems, some things for you to think about as you're reading its primary source. Okay, guys, so there's a total of 8 resources in this document set. You only need one. Pick one and find some evidence to support your argument of claim. So the first one is by Ben Franklin. It's a letter to Henry Home, or Henry Home Kames, or Lord Kames. Ben Franklin, I'm going to summarize these things real quick for you, and you do need to read it yourself. He's saying if the colonies start to populate that land on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains, it's going to make the British Empire extremely rich and wealthy. It'll be great for the empire to occupy this land all the way up to the Mississippi River because it would bring great fortune to the British Empire. Okay, if you see what he says here, if we keep it, all the country from St. Lawrence to the Mississippi will, in another century or 100 years, be filled with British people. Britain itself will become vastly more populous by the immense increase of its commerce. Commerce is money, trade. The Atlantic Sea will be covered with your trading ships, and your naval power, that's continually increasing, will extend your influence around the whole globe and all of the world. So what Ben Franklin is saying here is the good things that can come from occupying the land all the way up to the Mississippi River, which they can't do because of the proclamation of 1763. Resource 2, Britain Financial Situation, 1739 to 1775. All right, so at the beginning of the French and Indian War in 1755, the national debt for the British Empire was 74 million pounds, which is their dollar. By the end of the French and Indian War, that debt has doubled by roughly 70 million. That is a huge increase in debt for the British Empire. Debt is bad for countries. Very, very bad. You do not want to have a high national debt because that means you owe other countries or your own citizens that money, and it brings down that country's ability to defend itself and provide the services that people's need because it's constantly paying money back to the people that it owes rather than spending that money and providing services for its people. Look at the revenue. Revenue is the amount of money that a government brings in through taxes. So at the beginning of the French and Indian War, the revenue was at 6 million pounds. By the end of the French and Indian War, it was only up 3 million. That's not a whole lot of revenue being brought in compared to the debt. That's a problem. Government spending more than doubled. And the beginning of the French and Indian War, the government was spending 7 million pounds. By the end of it, 20 million. And most of that was financing the French and Indian War against the French in the 13 colonies. So because of this debt, the king and parliament are going to put taxes on the colonists to help repay the war debt. This is great evidence to use to support your argument of claim that the result of the French and Indian War was increased debt for the British. Source 3 is an author's account for the French and Indian War, Dave Ramsey. And what he says here is look at the third paragraph. The sad story of colonial oppression or bad mistreatment commenced or began in the year 1764, which is the beginning of the taxes on the colonies. Great Britain then adopted new rules or regulations respecting her colonies, which, after distributing the old harmony of the two countries, disturbing, that means after like 200 years of a good relationship between the colonies and Britain, in 1764, that relationship was torn apart. So 12 years after 1764 would be 1776, the year that the colonies declared independence. It says, for about 12 years, terminated or ended in a tearing apart of the empire. So what this last part is saying is because of the taxation on the colonies, it led to the Americans declaring independence. Resource 4 is author B.W. and it's titled "To the Inhabitants of the Province of Massachusetts Bay," and it's published in newspaper, the Boston Gazette and Country Journal. Take a look at what B.W. says. It says, "It is a stand-in maxim or true statement of English liberty that no man shall be taxed but with his own consent. And you know very well we were not, in any sober sense, represented in Parliament when this tax was imposed or forced on the people." That is great evidence, because what it's saying there is that the Parliament is not allowing the colonists to have representation, and it's forcing the colonists to pay taxes that they didn't have a say in. That's going to be a huge cause for the American Revolution, and it's one of the effects of the French and Indian War. Resource 5 is a picture. It says here, "A perspective view of the town of Boston, the capital of New England, and the capital of, or the landing of, troops in the year 1768. So here we have British troops landing in the colonies or in Boston. This is going to be another reason for the American Revolution. Because why is the king placing British troops in his own colonies during peacetime? Well, his troops are there to make sure that the colonists obey the rules. This is going to be another reason why the 13 colonies separate from England and its effect of the French and Indian War. Resource 6 is the famous speech by Patrick Henry. Take a moment to read this. Look at the very bottom. This is where he says his famous line, "Forbid it, Almighty God, I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." Resource 7 is the olive branch petition of the Second Continental Congress to King George. And what they are saying is, take a look. At the conclusion, the second paragraph down, "At the conclusion, therefore, of the late war," which is the French-Indian War, "your loyal colonists have contributed or added to its success by such repeated and strenuous exertions." That means they fought in the war. "As frequently procured or gave them distinguished approbation or approval of your majesty, of the late king, and of Parliament. Doubted not but that they should be permitted, with the rest of the empire, to share in the blessings of peace and the payments of victory," or immolations. What they're saying in this paragraph is this: we should have the right to move to the land we won. The proclamation of 1763 was unfair. Next, in Resource 8 is the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson says many things. You definitely need to know life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the unalienable rights. But in the Declaration of Independence, he's basically listing the reasons why the colonists are breaking up with England. So take a look where my mouse is. It says that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. What Thomas Jefferson is saying here is that the King of England has become destructive. The king and parliament are taking the rights of the people away, and it is the right of the colonists to end that relationship with England and to create a new government. And that's exactly what they did. They created the United States of America. They broke away from England with this document. Okay, guys, so there's 8 total sources. You need to pick evidence from one to answer or to provide evidence for your argument of claim and your explanation of evidence. So let's take a look at argument of claim, the Cogswell. So to get a 3, you need to introduce a clear opinion and provide logically ordered reasons that support the student's point of view. For number 4, you need, or 4.4, claims and subclaims are clearly introduced through writing and organized so that relationships between claims and subclaims are evident. To get a 5, what you need to do is expand on that and explain the relationship between the claims and subclaims. We're going to take a look at what claims and subclaims are right now so you don't get too confused. But let's take a look at 3. So 3.4 for argument of claim is the French and Indian War changed the relationship between the British and the colonists by the British taxing the colonists against their will. Let's take a look at a 3. Is this a clear opinion? Yes. Is it logically ordered reasons? Yes. So this argument of claim is a 3. Let's take a look at a 4 argument of claim. The French and Indian War changed the relationship between the British and the colonists because the war came a lot of expenses for the British, and as a result they decided to tax the colonists. The colonists were not happy about it because they had no representation with the taxation. That's a 4 because there's a subclaim, which is an added detail explaining the situation. And this person explained the relationship. Let's look at a 5 for argument of claim. Yes, this is an argument of claim. The French and Indian War changed the relationship between the British and the colonies because the British had spent an extreme amount of money on a war they couldn't really afford, so they made the colonists pay taxes without their consent. The colonists found certain things such as the British taxes to be a form of oppression. Also, after the war, the colonists didn't find the Proclamation of 1763 to be fair because they couldn't move past the Appalachian Mountains. Guys, that's a 5 because it introduces claims and subclaims. They're clearly introduced and they explain the relationship. Okay, so we got a 3, a 4, and a 5 for argument of claim. Now let's go to explanation of evidence. To get a 3, you have to explain a relevant fact, a concrete detail, and/or quotation that support the main idea. Let's take a look at a 3. So a 3 explanation of evidence is this. The colonists didn't want to be taxed against their will. They wanted to stop it. So according to BW, it is a standing maxim of English liberty that no man shall be taxed but with his own consent. You know very well that we were not any sober since represented in Parliament when this was opposed. All right, this tells me that, yes, you know what you're talking about. This supports the claim. And then you have a sentence explaining the fact. The colonists didn't want to be taxed against their will. They wanted to stop it. Yeah, this is a good solid 3. Let's take a look at a 4 explanation of evidence. It's the same thing as a 3. Take a look, but they added a explanation at the end of the quote. This proves that the colonists did not like being taxed and were going to protest against the British to remove the tax. You see, guys, the difference between a 3 and a 4? A 4 has more explanation. Take a look at that cog skill. Provides relevant analysis that explains how the selected evidence supports the claim. So this last sentence is that analysis component that you have to have. Let's take a look at a 5 explanation of evidence. After reading this article to the inhabitants of the province of Massachusetts Bay, you're able to see the point of view of the colonists. I knew this because the text states that no man shall be taxed but with his own consent. And you very well know we were not in any sober sense represented in Parliament when this tax was imposed. This statement proves that the colonists wanted representation in Parliament and didn't approve the taxes that were forced upon them. Parliament passed the Stamp Act and the Sugar Act without the consent of the colonists. The colonists didn't have any representation in Parliament. That's a solid 5. Why? Let's take a look. It provides a clear analysis that accurately explains how the selected evidence supports the claims or subclaims. Okay, guys, so let's go over this again. That's a 3 for explanation of evidence. That's a 4. That's a 5. All right, guys, so this is checkpoint 1. Checkpoint 1 is going to be due on Friday. Friday the 18th is when checkpoint 1 is done or due. So if you have any questions, your teacher will provide a workshop for you along the way. If you're confused with argument of claim or you need help with analyzing a primary source document, ask your teacher. Your teacher will definitely help you with analyzing that. Okay, guys, so this is checkpoint 1 in our project. So good luck, you can do it, and let me know or your teacher know if you have any questions.